You're listening to Underestimated, the podcast that helps overwhelmed small business owners turn their size into their unfair advantage so they can grow without burning out. Now, here's your host, Shawna Suckow.
Welcome to Underestimated. This is a podcast that is going to help you leverage your size as a small business as an advantage and not as a liability. I'm Shawna Suckow. I'm known as the Buyer Insider because I spent 15 years behind the corporate veil as a buyer. I spent millions and millions of dollars of other people's money, loved doing that. But what that taught me was how all types and all sizes of vendors market and sell at the buyer, whether it's B2B or B2C. And it gave me all of this insight into what was working and what wasn't. So I now am a speaker and an author and a consultant that helps small businesses to leverage what they have because everything has changed in how your buyers buy. So I am going to share those things with you along the way. So in today's episode, I am going to start and lay the foundation with why acting big is quietly hurting small businesses. It's counterintuitive to what we've always been told. So it's been for decades and decades that we have been given bad advice. We have been taught that we had to act big in order to be relevant, in order to be competitive against businesses that were twice our size, multiple thousand times our size, right? But everything has changed today, as I mentioned. And if we still continue to act bigger than we are, a lot of bad things happen today that don't need to happen anymore. It creates stress and overwhelm and a lot of wasted effort when what we really need to be doing is, for the first time, really owning our small size, because we have so many advantages today that we didn't have even 5 years ago. So the big lie has been, as I mentioned, that you have to act big, and that is outdated. So if you've ever, as a small business, felt like overwhelmed and scattered, or that you don't have a playbook that other businesses were given, and it seems maybe, oh, it's so easy for them, why am I struggling? I think I'm doing everything right. It's because that playbook is so outdated. And today, the whole reframe that I want to convey is that small today equals great things like agility that big businesses just don't have. It equals proximity to your customers that big businesses would pay millions of dollars to have. In fact, they do. It's called focus groups, where you can just talk to your customers. You have that proximity. And it also means freedom, because a small business, you can choose exactly who your, what I call your exact right customers are and who you want to target. Where big businesses, they've grown so big that they have to generically market to everybody and try to be all things to all people. Well, we as small business owners, we don't have to do that. We have the freedom to be who we want to be in business, and the freedom to serve who we want to serve. And we can niche down. We can have like I think they call it a rifle approach as opposed to a shotgun approach. And I only know this because we just bought a shotgun. I've never had a gun for the first time. So that's an analogy I totally normally wouldn't use, but I get it now. So rather than just, throwing things against a wall and seeing if they stick, we can have a targeted approach and really drill down to our exact right customers, which a lot of small businesses have fear around doing that they no longer need to have. So we don't lose today by being small. We lose in small businesses when we try to act big, especially when we try to act big too soon. And there's a cost to that is multiplied today because of the way things are changing. And the cost is it translates in when a small business feels the pressure of trying to be everything to everybody and trying to compete with big businesses who have unlimited budgets and huge teams that we just don't have. We do things like trying to be everywhere on every platform at once. And that's exhausting. And trying to be everywhere means we're probably not being good at it anywhere because we're spread too thin. It means that we may maybe have overbuilt systems that we invested a lot of money in, but they're too big, they're too cumbersome for the size we're at right now. And so we don't need to use all these expensive platforms and systems that are just too big for us in an effort to act and look and be bigger than we are. And I already talked about generic messaging, that generic messaging on all the different platforms, because when you're small, you can't help but try to be efficient. And the way that that shows up is a one size fits all message. And for me, so I own 3 small businesses currently. And my longest running one has been around since 2008. I've owned a ton of small businesses. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life since I was 8 years old, selling. Remember those, if you're a certain age, you remember those fuzzy pencils that when you'd put your hands on them and move the pencil back and forth, it had like this fuzz on top that would, and googly eyes and haha. Well, those pencils were a huge hit in 3rd grade, and I saw my chance. And so I went and made a bunch of those and sold those for a profit. I think that was probably my first, business. So anyway, I've had a bunch over the years, and I have learned that trying to be everywhere all at once it's expensive, it's exhausting. We can't be on all the platforms. So since 2008, when I've had my currently longest running business, I've made all the mistakes. I still make mistakes, but what I promise you in this podcast is I will always share with you not just all the successes and all the things that are going well and all the bright shiny things, but the failures too. And I'm going to admit my first failure was, so I'm a huge proponent for, and you'll hear this throughout the podcast episodes going forward, is I'm a huge proponent for just being yourself and being transparent and not posturing and not being perfect and not being too polished, because that's what big businesses have in spades. And we can't do that in the way that they can, because we don't have the time, the money, the teams. And so where we have an edge is just being ourselves and putting things out there without perfect lighting and scripting and all the perfection of the place and the photographer and all this stuff. We don't need all of that. Where we succeed is that done is better than perfect. And our audiences today more than ever respect that things aren't perfect. And what I tell my audiences, so as a speaker and an author, my expertise is in small business marketing, specifically, but this podcast is going to cover all things small business, because I'm going to bring in experts who have what I lack as far as expertise. But what that means is we can fail forward. And if I'm going to share it with you, I've tried it myself. And I speak to my audiences about the same thing, small businesses and marketing and what's working right now, because everything's changing so quickly. But where we tend to lose as small businesses is when we do try to have too big of a reach and try to be too perfect and wait and take our time, whereas we have that agility on our side. So that whole inconsistent execution and everything, I've fallen for it. And the thing that I wanted to share with you is I was so nervous about this podcast that I thought, okay, this first episode, I need to nail it. And so I scripted it, which is something I never do. I don't have a script on stage. I don't have notes on stage when I speak. I don't like when I'm doing videos for social media, I try to always do it in one take, unless there is a huge flub, and then I may do a second take, but you get what you get with me. Well, I didn't do that for my first recording of the podcast. And when I watched it back, I'm like, this is horrible. This is so bad. You can see that I am reading word for word, and it's just so not me. And so I had to trash it. And I had to throw away all that work and start over. So this is me starting over and just talking to you. Yes, I have a couple bullet points that I'm referring to, so I don't miss anything that I think you really need to know. But that was a failure. I still make mistakes. I am not perfect, even after almost 20 years with my speaking business and my other businesses. And so I'm going to share those with you in an effort to help you learn from what I've done wrong and the places where I've failed, so that we can fail forward together rather than just posturing and doing all the things that I tell people, small business owners, not to do. My end goal is to make you hugely successful in your own right. How successful do you want to be? I want to do everything I can to help you get there. And I can only take you to a certain point. Once you hit 10, 12, 15, 20 million dollars, that's where my expertise ends. And so I will bring experts in that are going to help you get to that point. And if you are beyond that point, will this podcast have value for you? Sure, it'll still have value for you. But when you get to that point, there are podcasts out there that will better serve you. So I want to be honest about that as well. My other goal is to help give you the tools so that you don't burn out, because I know what it's like to wear all the hats and to be responsible for doing all the things. And so that's why I'm not going to wear all the hats in this podcast. Some of the episodes will be solo episodes, especially when it comes to marketing, because that is where I drill down and where I can be the most helpful. And there will be episodes where I have guests that can complement all the parts of small businesses that I don't know well enough to consider myself an expert. Like, I am terrible at financials, and I am not a great manager. I'm not a great leader. I have learned that about myself over the years. And I also have learned that I don't want to be a gigantic business. I want to be big enough so that I can have the living and the type of business that I find manageable without being too stressful, that I can have a certain lifestyle and a certain retirement without all the stress and the long hours and the things that I put upon myself when I was younger and when I had other businesses that took me away from my family and took me away from my kids. So I've learned a lot through the years. I am going to share with you the good and the bad and the ugly, but together we are going to grow our businesses in the ways that are right for me and right for you. And every small business owner, you got into small business so you could choose, right? Because you didn't want to have to report to somebody else. And so I'm going to help you grow where I can. And I'm going to bring in experts to help you grow where I can't. And together we're going to fight burnout and overwhelm and trying to be something we're not. And so I want to introduce you to a concept that I'm going to be talking about a lot throughout this podcast and future episodes. And that is what I call the sandbox problem. And as I'm thinking about where we are now, and I study buyer behavior as I have since I was one. I continue to study buyer behavior and consumer behavior. So whether you are B2B, whether you're trying to sell to other businesses, or whether you are focused on selling to consumers, or both, I want to talk about the sandbox problem through the lens of our ideal customers, whoever they are for you. And I will tell you that the delineation, the separation between B2B and B2C has never been thinner since COVID, and it's only getting thinner by the day, by the month, because buyers are changing. But in order to not cover too much in this first episode, I'm going to save how buyers are changing for a future episode. But the sandbox problem is this. Big businesses have huge budgets and huge teams and tons of resources, so they can compete on scale. So they are in this gigantic sandbox where they own the market that they're in the way that they're doing things. So when we try to compete in their sandbox, we cannot create huge volume through advertising like they do, because we don't have those resources. We can't have all of the polish and perfection, and because we don't have those teams, and we don't have the ad agencies and the marketing agencies and all of that. So why play in their sandbox when we can't win on their terms? Let's win on our own terms. Let us create our own sandbox where we can win. And what that looks like is not trying to look and sound and be big. It is by owning what we can kill on every time. And that is our agility, our proximity to our customers, the fact that we don't have layers, the fact that we can be imperfect, which is accepted more today by our customers than ever before, and in fact, encouraged. And we see that in how they're voting with their dollars and how that is changing. And the truth about big companies, I was at a speaking engagement where I saw Google Fiber, a guy from Google Fiber, the home office, and he was on stage talking about how he wished that they could really embed themselves in local markets the way that smaller competitors can, and they can't. Google Fiber cannot ever say, hey, we're your neighbor. They try, but they can't. We don't believe it. Our BS meter goes way off as a consumer saying, you are not down the street. I know you have a huge call center that maybe isn't even in the country, and you are not my neighbor. So big companies are trying to pay millions to capture what we already have. So we have these advantages now that we've never had before, and we need to take those and leverage those. So when we spread ourselves too thin and we try to act too big and be too perfect, it is hurting us today more than it could ever help us. And the good thing is we don't have to anymore. And I want to reiterate, if you have been trying to act big, it's not your fault. It is that we have always thought that this is the right way to do things. And as a newer speaker, many, many years ago, I fell victim to that. I still fall victim to that when I see a speaker or an author who has like Jeb Blount. He's got $1 million, bazillion dollar, million copies bestseller. I can't compete in that sandbox. So why should I try? I want to compete in my own. I want to succeed with the narrow focus that I have, serving exactly who I want to serve. So we are going to fight through all of this and fight the generic messaging and the polish and fight through the burnout and the trying to be all things to all people and choose a different path. We're going to choose to play in our own sandbox where we absolutely can win by leveraging our own superpowers as a small business. So throughout the podcast, I'm going to talk about 4 guiding principles. And as I wrap this up, I'm going to tell you what those are. Those are focus over presence, meaning we're going to narrow our focus and try not to be present everywhere because that's how we lose. That's their sandbox, not ours. We're going to focus on relationships over reach. That means what I call out-humaning the competition, competing in ways that they can't. They wish they could, but they can't. We can. We're going to compete on the third principle being speed over polish. If you look over the next week on the types of marketing that make you stop scrolling, I bet that is somebody just talking direct to camera. It is a single person. It is not a polished advertisement. I bet you speed past everything that looks like an ad that's too perfect and too stock photo, too obvious actors, too scripted, all those things. So we're going to focus on speed over polish, on relevance over volume, not creating more content, but making the content that appeals to our exact right audience on our exact right platform, or maybe platforms, and not all of them. And we're going to focus on our exact right customer. So what you can expect from this podcast going forward is I am going to challenge in many ways the playbook that you have or the playbook that you're still being told on all kinds of other shows, on all kinds of other media that are telling you have to do something one way when that is not true anymore. And I will bring the receipts to prove it to you. And you can expect that everything that I share, I have tested myself. And I will share the good, the bad, and the absolute outright failures. And you can also expect that I'm going to run everything through the lens of, does this make sense for small business? And if that answer is no, it doesn't belong here. And I will tell you those things too. Like, you may have heard of this tool or this idea, And you can suggest them to me and challenge me on these things too. And I will do shows about that. But in closing, I want to just reiterate that you don't need to act bigger to win. And you do not need to be louder, and you don't need to be everywhere, and you don't need to be perfect and polished. And we collectively can give up on competing in that other sandbox because it's not made for us. And frankly, our ideal customers aren't there. And we can attract our exact right customers by leveraging the superpowers we already have. And your size as a small business is your superpower. So stay tuned to future episodes about all the ways that we are going to explore where you can leverage your size to capture your exact right customers and outhuman all of your competitors, big or small. That's what this show is going to be about. And I will just say, welcome to Underestimated.
Thanks for listening to Underestimated, hosted by Shawna Suckow. To connect with Shawna, go to thebuyerinsider.com.